All right, so let's talk about pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins in relation to the lungs and the alveoli. So it's the pulmonary arteries and veins that carry blood from your heart to your lungs and then from your lungs to your heart. So the pulmonary artery, looking here at this image, these are the blue portions here. The pulmonary arteries, you have a right and a left, branches off from the heart and is carrying deoxygenated blood from the body towards the lungs so that the lungs may refresh the oxygen in the blood. So the pulmonary arteries branch off and they sort of follow the same pattern as the bronchi, the bronchial tree divisions. You can see here that the right pulmonary artery branches off, sort of like a primary branch. You have secondary branches of the pulmonary artery branching off to serve the lobes of the right lung. And then you have branches off of the pulmonary arteries that continue to branch and follow the branches of the bronchial tree, getting smaller and smaller and smaller until the pulmonary artery, until that branch has become a tiny capillary that wraps the alveoli. At that point, you can see, using this image again here, you can see the blood cells, the red blood cells, dropping off carbon dioxide and taking in oxygen from the alveolar air. And at this point, the capillaries that are the tiniest branches of the pulmonary arteries course into the capillaries of the pulmonary veins. And the pulmonary veins do the exact reverse of the pulmonary artery. From the alveolus, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, coming together from the different areas of each lobe of the lung, then coming together from each lobe of the lung into a primary branch of the pulmonary vein to bring freshly oxygenated blood back to the heart to then be pumped out to the body to provide oxygen for the body. Moving on. Your respiratory system has a few ways of getting rid of or keeping pollutants out of your body. The first being the hairs in your nose, your nostril hairs. We all have them, and there's a lot of them. When you get to graduate school, and we'll watch SLPs doing swallowing studies where they thread the camera through someone's nose to the back of their throat. Always when they put the camera right there, they start moving back. You move through like a big bunch of bushy nostril hairs. So the purpose of those nostril hairs is to catch any large foreign particles. My best example is that when I was in high school, I always took the wood shop every year. Where I was, it was called building construction, but it was basically wood shop. And at the end of wood shop, you swept up all the sawdust. So you're in this warehouse and you've got a bunch of kids and they're all sweeping sawdust and breathing sawdust. And even if we had on face masks, which is a big if, I would get to the next class, and about halfway through the next class, I would sneeze, and a giant wad of mucousy sawdust would come out of my nose. So you have my nostril hairs catching all that sawdust, trying to keep it from getting into the lungs where it's going to do some damage. The upper respiratory systems, you have what are called goblet cells. And goblet cells are mucus producing cells. So they produce a little blob of mucus, and that little blob of mucus hangs out in your respiratory system until something like a piece of sawdust tries floating by and sticks to it. So if you're breathing a lot of particulates, sawdust, or if you're a smoker or whatever it is, that whatever foreign particulates it is that you're breathing in, they're going to stick to those goblet cells. But those goblet cells with that mucus, they just can't hang on to that forever. They have to get it out of the respiratory system. So your upper airways have a ciliated membrane, which means that there's all these cells on the epithelium within the upper respiratory system. They all have these cilia, which are these projections that reach out and just sort of wave like this. And so once that goblet cell gets enough stuff stuck on its mucus, that mucus comes off and it hits a cilia, waves it up to another cilia, it waves it up, and in that way, all the mucus is slowly moved up high enough in the respiratory system where hopefully you're going to cough it or sneeze it up. It's a part of the circulatory system, but you have the lymphatic system or your lymph system. This is your part of your body that helps you fight infection. We're going to come back to it. Here's some images of the ciliated epithelia. Your respiratory passages also help condition air and prepare it for respiration within the lungs. Your respiratory passages do this by warming and humidifying the air. It warms the air because the epithelial tissue within your respiratory passageway, so up in your nose, the capillaries are very close to the surface, so you've got a lot of warmth coming from your blood flow that is able to distribute that warmth into the air as it goes by. And also your nasal cavity, your pharynx, it's very wet up in here. So that allows the moisture from your epithelial tissue to transfer into the air as it is passing through your nose, through your upper respiratory system, making the air more humidified, more warm, so that the lungs are best able to do their work with the air when the air gets there. And as I may have already mentioned, the right lung has 3 lobes: superior, middle, and inferior. Left lung has only superior and inferior. I mentioned this at the beginning of the class, but the location of the heart in the thorax is called the mediastinum. Within the mediastinum, you have the nerves, the blood vessels, the lymph vessels that service the heart. As it says here, the esophagus passes through the mediastinum on its way south to the stomach. And this is the area of your body that is most protected. It has everything else on top of it. To get to the heart, you got to get through rib cage, lung, vertebral column. It's very well protected.